Good morning. I feel like we ain't had coffee together in a long time. So let's do. Cause chat is Saturday, the day before my Bronx series air. So it's story time. So to start this series and to tell y'all the story of the Bronx in the 90s, we gotta go all the way back to 1994. In 1994, Gary, Indiana was titled the murder capital of the United States because during this time period, there was about 5 homicides a day. A day. Every day. But it was a reason behind this. In the 1960s, Gary was fueled by the steel mill industry. And as the steel mill industry declined and ultimately went out of business, the crack epidemic hit in the late and early 90s. Like most men, honey, if it ain't no money in it, the man leave. So most fathers in the home left, navigated to other city states, relationships, leaving the sons behind to be the man of the house. And so when being the man of the house in the early 90s, with no jobs in the area, these boys had no choice but turn to the hustle. Now, while turning to the hustle of the crack epidemic was their option, they didn't really factor in the fact that every neighborhood had this same problem. So every neighborhood will have the same hustle. And with Concord and the Bronx being so close in proximity, I think that may have been where the problem arose, but that's neither here nor there. Based on statistics, attribute the problems to the drug cartel and the gang wars. Because while some in Concord, well, I think all of Concord is vice lord. In the Bronx, some was vice lord, some was GD folks. And while I don't know when the disturbance erupted, honey, but when you factor in drugs, large amounts of money, gang issues, and women, child, you setting yourself up for complete disaster. And that's exactly what happened in the city of Gary. With these two neighborhoods, Concord and the Bronx, they warred back and forth daily. Every week in the Bronx, we went to a different funeral, sometimes two at a time. And some of these boys fighting for their life and their family's survival on both sides of the fence just couldn't figure out how to put an end to this. As the two leaders always tried until they couldn't see eye to eye no more. At one point in our city, the mayor himself came down from his big glorious house, the city hall, to get in the middle, to meet up in the middle with both neighborhoods to see if he could get a peaceful resolution out of them. And child, that man ain't no Farrakhan or Malcolm X. And while he tried, gunshots rained out with him out there. Now that event absolutely positively pissed local politicians, authorities, and police departments alike off. And it was at this point that they realized that this problem is bigger than us. It's time to call the marshals. It's time to start a federal investigation. And that's just what they did. A federal investigation. Now, during this time, these boys was in and out of jails just as well as in and out of hospitals because they was getting shot, they was getting arrested, they couldn't go outside really, but they continued to go outside, knowing what was outside waiting on them. And while they was plotting on the opponent was always plotting on them too. Just thinking about the events that occurred, I sit here and I wonder how Did they even think it was feasible to maintain the hustle in the midst of all that beef? But child, back then we was having a time. The ladies too. Sometimes the girls would break out fighting the girls. You know, the girls from Concord, the girls from the Bronx. It was just a big, big mess back then. And then going in and out of jail, going back and forth to funerals, in and out the hospital being shot. Child, mamas wasn't even safe. And while both sides always tried to live by the street code, women and children are off limits. By the time things calmed down, mothers and children did end up getting hurt. And that's what's crazy, because even after the federal indictment, life in both Concord and the Bronx wasn't easy. The big dogs was gone. The little ones had to step up and take over. And while the beef may have calmed down after the indictment, the struggle and the hustle of living in Gary, Indiana never ceased. On my first podcast episode, we'll sit down with Brother B. That's his street name. His real name is Adonis Gillespie. He my brother. Bye, Bert. Adonis will sit down and explain to you not so much of his criminal activity, but his role in the diminish of his community in the late and early 90s. He will also explain to you being shot 5 times, clinging to life for a period of almost 1 month, running his family in and out of the hospital just to make sure he's still breathing. And then after being shot, being a convicted felon because he just couldn't leave the streets alone. Being in and out of jail, becoming a father while in jail, he faced some tragic adversity, child. I know. I had to keep those books. But when it finally hit him, when it finally dawned on him that the outcome of the street life was either life behind bars or for us to suit him up for the casket, he packed up and left. And what a man he turned out to be. But joining him on the podcast will be his best friend, because there's absolutely, positively no way I could tell the story of Bone without telling the story of Spank. Spank was there that night Bone got shot. And for many years, it was rumored that these two not only dabbled in the cartel of Indiana, but they had some exchange business across state lines. And that is what led to the shooting. But it's been questioned. Did Spank leave Bone that night? It's only one way to find out. As he tells the story, the two will always be one. You don't want to miss this series as it begins to unravel, because while these are my first 2 guests, baby, the list is all the way through to the end of the year. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. The link is in my bio.